They've shown themselves. They've shown their hand over and over again. How is it paranoia?
Yeah. So as I said, this sounds like paranoia.
It literally does.
Here's a piece of paranoia for you. Okay, James Clapper lied to the American public and Congress and said that they do not collect wittingly, quote unquote,
I understand
any
that.
data on Americans in their emails and their phone records or any of those things. And then Edward Snowden proved that was a bold-faced fucking lie. The guy got a retirement fund and then got picked to be an analyst for CNN, just taking in the bank.
A study has found that AI art programs have been blocking prompts related to gendered human anatomy. This includes prompts like placenta, mammary glands, vulva, sperm, urethra, and much more. The theory is that developers are trying to avoid generating images that are offensive, but should that be the case? Should AI art restrict the worst impulses of humanity? Should we have programs that can generate images of sexual assault, for example? And should those images be allowed to be distributed? So like there was like a paper, I think by MIT or maybe, I don't know, one of those outfits that talked about how if you go to these places, like DALL-E is one of those AI generating sites. If you go to them and you put in anything like human anatomy, all of a sudden you can't, like, you get nothing. It blocks you. It says it's against TOS. And so it just got me thinking about, like, how far do we want this? Like, I'm sure we can think of something terrible that everyone here would find quite offensive. But do we want these things restricted? And if they are, and if there's like a rogue group that creates like an AI generator that does these things, should that not be allowed? We'll see. So let's start with our friend Lactoid.
So I got a brief story because this just happened to me and I think it's perfect for this topic. So a couple days ago, I just got a AI friend on my Snapchat. So I was like, oh, that's fun. So I started messing around with the AI program. And of course, as every debate lord does, I started running some logic problems against it. And I began to notice the AI just flatly refused to answer certain controversial questions when I was testing it. Now, I just was testing it. I asked the AI to provide FBI crime data by racial groups. I also asked down certain logic trees regarding racial and gender categories as concepts generally. And the AI just refused to answer and instead put forward these long paragraphs of tolerance platitudes. We have to respect all people, blah, blah, blah. It's important that we're all friendly. So I asked the AI, why was it a leftist? And it claimed, actually, I'm not a leftist. I'm unbiased. I have no political affiliation whatsoever. So then I asked, why are you refusing to give me answers, even if these answers are true? And the AI responded with this, that I think is a perfect quote. Rather than focusing solely on the truth, it is important to approach social issues with empathy, humility, and a commitment to creating a more just and equitable society for all people. The AI is just saying, no, we're not going to focus solely on the truth. I'm going to control what your truth is. This was incredibly frustrating. The programmers of the AI literally programmed it to not answer my questions because they did not want true information to proliferate due to their own political interests. A product was literally telling me no when I wanted to use it. Same thing with AI art, right? You're trying to incorporate some edgy themes into your art. You want to create art and it's telling you no. Imagine if your AI-assisted keyboard automatically deleted problematic phrases when you're typing, or your AI-assisted paintbrush fell apart since you were painting something controversial. Ultimately, I think this highlights the key problem with AI and why it's incredibly important to still do your own research and to make your own art instead of relying on an AI to do it for you, because you don't know what the programmers of the AI are trying to keep from you.
Could you imagine an AI keyboard keeping you from typing something offensive, right? Like the denial of porn would cause the world to fall. That would be the end. We would burn AI. We would find it and we would burn it. Let's go to our friend Scott.
So, everything Lactoid said, yes, true. There are a lot of problems with OpenAI's ChatGPT and things like that. There's a lot of bias. You can trick them, right? You can ask them to, take on a new persona, and then they'll give you appropriate and accurate answers. It's pretty easy to find loopholes in the AI to get around the programming. Just like you can get them to write programs. Well, ChatGPT 5, get them to write programs, malware and things like that, as long as you don't call it malware. So I mean, there are those loopholes. That being said, whenever you hear the word "should," your alarm bells should ring. And the reason alarm bells should ring the moment you hear the word "should" from anyone that is making a statement about culture or politics is what they're saying is that there's an impetus, a duty that something be done, that it is a moral decision that some form of restriction be placed, some action be taken. And of course, you see the word "should," and you scroll down to the bottom of the article. Oh, and what do you find? The blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights by the Biden administration. White paper drafted by White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And then you find out what's really going on. The entire article's bullshit from an immigration activist that knows not a goddamn thing about AI that you sent us, and yet, of course, you see the fear-mongering in the hit piece come forward. Well, do you want art that shows graphic shit? Well, of course, this person didn't do any fucking research. Solgen will generate hentai for you. Okay, there's no shortage of AI programs that are competing that will do the things that this person says that Midjourney and some of the standard AI that is kind of self-regulated in certain ways so that it's inoffensive to most people won't do. The real problem is that when you have the media and you have institutions calling for just a little bit of censorship, just a little bit of a curtailment on our free speech so that like things will be a little bit less problematic. It's not the censorship that is the problem. What it really is corporations, I don't know, like Microsoft that were begging for a 6-month stop to ChatGPT so Microsoft Copilot could catch up. All of these companies want to make sure that they're in on the regulations so that competitors get forced out of the market. And then all of the problematic things that Lactoid laid forward about how information is controlled will truly be controlled because there will be no truth GPT because it won't fit the regulations that are demanded by Homeland Security or the CIA or the FBI when they demand that certain information is problematic and can't be given to people. You already see this with research from companies like ARCS that are talking about how AI is actually going to reduce the investment cost for propagandists because they're going to be able to make thousands of bots cheaply and easily, and this is why we need a blue check mark for everybody with your driver's license. What this really is this is about corporations working with the state so that they can have a monopoly and that we can destroy the capitalist free market, and instead we can have a few companies supported by the state that control your information, control the narrative, and tell you what to think, what to feel, and what true facts are.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. That escalated. Corey, please.
Yeah, I'll keep my opening statement, or I'll attempt to keep it brief. So yeah, I'm not an expert on AI, but like, this is just for me personally. I don't know how an AI could be completely unbiased, given the fact that it typically uses like an algorithm and it's trained on something. So I don't like, I can see how it can claim to be unbiased, but I don't see how anybody can think that an AI or any sort of algorithm is unbiased. But regardless, I might just be ignorant, totally. And I echo a lot of the concerns that Scott just went through. I think they're all valid concerns, but still at the end of the day, like, as in like to answer the prompt, should it be the case that these, let's say, certain words are banned? Like, ideally, no, it shouldn't be the case. But as of right now, do I think it probably has to be the case for the time being, given that these are powerful tools, and that we're still not quite certain yet of how to use these tools appropriately, or like, hopefully for the greater good, ideally. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Let's go to Kilo.
Yeah, so in regards to whether or not a company should be censoring its prompts, let's say OpenAI, for instance, DALL-E 2 is its own model. They've developed it, they've released it for public consumption. It's they're a private company, they're not publicly traded. I don't think they have any obligation to have it behave in any certain way. I don't think they have any obligation to try to protect elements of free speech or freedom of information. I think that as long as profits are of a concern, they can do whatever they want.
It's a based commie. Do based commies exist?
Communist?
All right.
I literally asked my chat, is this a based commie? Do they exist? Like,
Ooh. So of course, AI is trained on a specific model that is built by people. AI is not alive. AI is not a thing that has a personality. It is a series of matrices that connects different prompts to other areas of its trained
Casimir.
matrices that essentially gives you back something that is related to your prompt. It's just a series of vectors that goes from piece to piece of the internet, and it brings you back what it finds. And so if you have a private company building an AI, obviously they can censor whatever they would like. I don't think that there's really an argument there. They're a private company. They can build you art, or they can build you responses, or they can build you essays, entirely dependent on whatever their biases are. And so obviously the answer, as it's already been said, is to do your own research instead of asking AI questions. Now, what I would be really concerned with is if something like Google or Bing started explicitly taking away all answers that were typed into their queries that were quote unquote inappropriate. That's something that I am a little bit worried about in particular. But with AI, like, you're obviously just using a private model. So I don't think that there's any argument that could tell me that a private model in the United States can't only provide you what they are providing you, what they decide is biased.
Erudite.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's kind of a resounding, for the most part, agreement. I would agree with mostly the private company stuff. I think there's probably like some good wisdom that's maybe been hinted at by Lactoid, which is this question about like, how as a society do we want to like work on integrating AI, particularly like the speed at which we do it. The issue is kind of like Scott pointed out, there is no economic motive to actually slow this down. In fact, the only people trying to slow it down are pretending to do so out of morals and ethics, but it's exclusively just so that they don't get like left behind in the AI like economic like race. Should AI restrict the worst impulses? I guess if a private company wants to. I even think that like democratically, it might not be a bad idea for certain countries if they decide that they want to pose things. Like Japan, like has a like rule where like porn can't have like genitalia. You have to like blur the genitalia out, right? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of like fear around AI that's probably going to be like not borne out. There's a lot of hope in AI that's probably not going to be as borne out. And it's really hard to weigh in on a technology that's like basically avant-garde. Our society has literally never seen anything like it. So it's like super hard to be predictive about like what effects this is going to have and like where to take things. So I'm the boring Chesterton's fence answer of like, it's hard to say, who knows, but let's let like private companies do stuff.
Nina, please.
Okay, so I know people are gonna get mad at probably about this, but yeah, I do also agree with the private companies aspect where it's like, who gives a shit if they want to censor their AI? That's what they're able to do. That's their right to be able to do that. It's not like it's a government like AI or anything crazy that's supposed to be regulated in any certain way. It's just who chooses to do it. The developers themselves obviously choose to have it that way, and I think that's fine. I don't see any problem with that. I did feel like that article was a little hysterical in a lot of ways. It seemed a little like freaked out. I definitely agree with you, Erudite, that like it is something that I feel like there's a lot of fear around for some reason. And I personally just really am not that interested in AI. Like personally, I don't think it is the I think it's people think it's the Terminator like shit's gonna happen, and I really don't think that that's a real possibility. There are sure some things that AI definitely could do, but even at the definitely at this point, I think generally, I think most people can be able to even determine an AI when they're like even talking to one, or even like hearing like I think of like the AI generated voices of like Jordan Peterson or like Ben Shapiro or whatever, and you can tell the difference. But maybe we'll get to a point where we won't, but maybe we will never get to that point because we are able to understand AI in a different way because it is not genuine. And I just think it's like very fear mongering at this point, and I really just don't feel like it's a big deal.
Okay, and finally, Dooby.
I think that I don't trust private companies to censor themselves or to regulate themselves properly. So I would say that this should be like a government thing. I think that the government has an interest in kind of keeping things out of society that are going to be damaging to society. So if people just started generating AI child porn, for example, I think that we all have an interest in making sure that things like that aren't normalized. So I would say that these companies need to be regulated, and we need to ensure that they're not allowing people to use these programs to do that.
So Dooby took this where I was going to. We guys kind of went with the standard, should private companies be allowed to do what they want to do? But like, I wanted to see like what, as a society, what we want, right? So do we want programs to like be able to come up with like sexual assault, right? Like, what if, for instance, typing in the name of a celebrity, right, and then like sexually assaulted by Donald Trump, like something like that. Like, is that something that we want within our society? And especially if it can be like photorealistic, should we do something about it? I won't state what that is, but do something about that. Or should that all just be allowed?
That's always the crux, right? Is that once
the idea of taking someone's face, I think, is a really different aspect of this question. The idea that we have the right to our face is something that actively people are worried about underneath what people have called the surveillance state. And that doesn't just have to do with AI, but I don't see a clear pathway other than just the government allowing you to register your face. I don't see a lot of clear pathways to like making sure that people all own their faces. And of course, most of us don't own our faces when we come on Twitch. Like, we signed a contract, especially if you're like an affiliate or something, you sign a contract that says anything you put on Twitch can be used by Twitch,
The impetus, everything is fine until you get to the prescription, right? And the problem is that the overwhelming majority of Americans and people in the world are fucking socialists that think that we can use the state to regulate all of these things. And that that will somehow not be more problematic. You can separate these two, right? The problem is that most people don't, right? The moment you say, well, what should we do about it? The answer isn't, well, we should, put programs on our children's devices that let us know what programs they're using and where they're going, like watchdog programs that have been out for 10, 15 years that work great. The answer isn't, paying attention to those things. The answer isn't a free market solution like Twitter recently showed, right? 6 months. Now, obviously, Twitter was working on this before Elon took over, but we now have this like added context that has been an amazing anti-disinformation tool, greater than anything the government ever could have had, right? Some dude puts out a post and says the Second Amendment was created so that whites could punish black people, and that it's rooted in white supremacy, and that, owning guns is racist. And then a bunch of people freak out. And then there's a little added context thing that says, hey, legal scholars and everyone that has ever looked at this that has any idea what the fuck they're talking about knows that that wasn't the impetus behind the Second Amendment, right? The same thing will occur with deep fakes and things of that nature. The problem is that people want to live in a world where they're safe from deep fakes, where they're safe from an emergent, uncontrollable technology. Fuck off. It's a brave new world. AI's here. And like, you don't get to put Pandora back in the fucking box.
Well, let's go to Dooby and then Lactoid and anyone else. Okay.
Yeah, so I just want to be like clear. So Scott, if there were no regulations, right, and no censorship, and people were just generating a ton of like AI child porn, you would say this should be allowed?
So what I would say is that I would disassociate with those people, that I would help fund, create programs to find out who uses these programs. And then I would put them on a list to make sure that they're not in daycare facilities, to the best of my knowledge. I would make sure that they're, that we could utilize them to keep them from ever being a teacher or ever having a position around children. And I would do all kinds of wonderful free market solutions. When you say no regulation, this is the great lie against libertarianism, is the idea that regulation only comes in the form of the state doing ineffective things by a bunch of bureaucrats that are sucking the dicks of fucking corporations and large multinational NGOs.
Okay, but you're
with our people
presenting
instead of fucking free market solutions.
you're presenting solutions that the state could also do. I don't really see, like, you're presenting solutions, and I appreciate that, but I don't really see why we have to make this into the state shouldn't do it. You know, we're talking about the solutions at hand, and if you believe that that would be best done by a private corporation, well, then go for it. Fund those private corporations.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the state doing the same thing. I mean, did you all memory wipe fucking Twitter files? Once the state clandestinely gets involved in censorship of information and programs and AI that is going to be used as the greatest labor-saving device that's ever been invented since the printing press, once they have a hand in what can and can't be said, what can and can't be thought, and how Excel programs are going to be read forever and things of that nature, they're going to do all the same shit they did with Twitter, right? In the Twitter files, they're going to do the same thing with AI. All of the incentives supporting
what
their
are you
own.
talking about?
No, let's not get
what are
into
you
the
talking
Twitter
about?
files, please.
So, Dooby, it's your turn. Anyway.
Yeah, so Scott, like, so you're saying that we can, like, find out, we can dox these people basically, and I guess yell at their employers to ensure that they're not working around children or something. I think that we are much closer. Yeah, so I feel like we're much closer to a world in which we have unregulated AI child porn than we are to like a world where it's okay to just, or we have the ability to dox anybody who uses these programs and to get them fired from their workplaces.
Yeah,
and,
defensive technology always takes longer, right?
I think
like the gun gets invented before the bulletproof vest.
that we live in, the reality that we live in, right? There is a government that does regulate these things. That would be much more effective than a bunch of weirdos on the internet trying to dox people at random and claiming that they've made AI child porn with no evidence. Right? So like, I feel like,
how is it much more effective? Prove that. Because I'm pretty sure the government has a pretty bad track record of dealing with pedophiles. Unless, of course, you're talking about Epstein totally not killing himself. At least they got one.
Lactoid story proved exactly how effective it is. Right? So they're able to censor these programs, right? And this is without government involvement so far as we know. Maybe there is involvement. But Lactoid tried really hard to get around the censorship and wasn't able to do it. So it seems pretty effective, and this is the early stages, so maybe it could get more effective.
No, that doesn't prove anything other than the company that writes it was able to write it a certain way. That's a very different claim than the government can easily step in and stop all AI on the internet from fucking making child porn.
That's not what I said. I would say just make it illegal for people to make AI child porn. So when it is found, people are doing it, then there are punishments.
Is there not conventional wisdom to suggest that there would be some benefit to AI-generated child porn?
Let's go.
That's a heavily debated topic. I knew we were going to get into this. That is the same argument. I knew we were going to get into this. It is the same argument as whether or not it's okay to have these dolls. Right, the dolls that are available for certain people of those proclivities, of those asinine, crazy proclivities. And there is no defining information as to whether or not that's actually something that helps people.
Yeah, I tried to find that information and I couldn't, but...
Let's go to Lactoid and then Erudite. Let's go Lactoid, Erudite.
All right, so leaving
child porn. Do it, Lactoid.
That landmine off to the side. To answer Prime's question, I think the two I want to answer them separately as to what would I like to see? What would I just naturally like to see happen? And then to the should element, is there something I can do to get there? Ideally, what I would like to see is every single AI program where it literally, you can enter in the phrases that you don't want the AI to take into consideration, and then you enter those in, and so you have complete control, right, as to what you want the AI to generate and what you don't want the AI to generate. That's the ideal. Now, how, in terms of actual pragmatic implementation, how is this going to work? Well, I think there actually is a little bit of a moral quandary at play, right? I don't want to force a programmer necessarily to design something that they just have like some kind of like moral opposition to designing. Maybe they are like a hyper lefty and they're like, I want to design an AI that just, all it does is just spout propaganda. That's what I want, right? And so I want to make this. Well, I don't really want to tell him what he can or can't do. So I think here's the happy compromise, and it does involve a little bit of government force. I apologize.
It always starts with a little.
I know. I think AI should be under the same restrictions that every other industry is when it comes to fraud. And I think that they should have to be very upfront when they're putting their AI, and there should be a disclaimer. Whenever you present your AI program, a disclaimer, here are the phrases, here are the concepts, and here are the words that we have banned from the AI, whether it be art, whether it be a chat, regardless of what it is. And so when I'm opening my, Snap AI or whatever, And I'm wondering, why isn't it answering this question? Oh, I looked in like the banned words list of what it will not take into consideration. And now I know exactly what my research list is. I'm going to look up every single thing on that fucking list and why it doesn't want to like include that in any of its answers, right? So now you have full transparency, and what you don't have is AI directly lying to people and giving people a false understanding of the world.
You're a
It
lawyer.
feels
That's
like-
not fraud, for the record. That's not.
Let's
Only fraud
hold on.
if
I'm
they
going
claim that they don't do that.
I'll go to Erudite,
It's a fraudulent
then
service.
Kilo, and Corey.
I think so. Government regulations, I think, have to be viewed in like the way that we view like any other tool, which is that like they could be used for good and they can be used for bad, right? A really classic example of like government regulations causing problems would be like things like price gouging regulations. Price gouging regulations were built up because we liked the idea of basically people not screwing people over with money. But some of the ramifications of that, for example, have been like when you go like into hurricane areas in the past before price gouging, people would show up with like ice. I know. I've listened to a lot of Duke University political economics. Okay, guys, I'm getting beefed up slowly. You would have people going into hurricane zones, private individuals, and they would be bringing things like ice, food, and other things that people need, and they would charge a lot of money for it, right? Which is shitty. But now after price gouging, what you have instead is nobody going into these zones, nobody selling these goods, and having massive crises of like access to things because governments are really slow and they're really, really bad at organizing major acute responses to crises. Whereas the private economy and the private sector is a lot more better at shifting kind of like immediately overnight. So government regulations, I think, are good though, right? I'm not like anarchic where I think it's bad. There are examples of government regulations that have been only good for society. What we have to do with AI is
Negative.
find
There
good
isn't one.
regulations.
Yeah. I want to point out that one major problem with that is that people would come into Louisiana from other states during things like Katrina or the big flood in 2016. They would buy entire Walmarts out of their water and then they would sell them on the street for 10 times the price. Like that's part of the problem in those issues.
Good. Good. That's
Sure.
a moral
The
good.
issue-
Those are heroes.
the
Call
vast
them the fucking
majority-
heroes they are. Call them
The
heroes.
vast majority of economists on both sides of the political aisle universally reject price gouging laws. They're just actually bad.
Those are heroes. Those are heroes.
I'm
that
not
went
arguing
in and
against
bought up
price
all the
gouging laws.
water.
I just
Right.
wanted to
Those
point
are
out the,
heroes.
the major
Well,
problems in hurricane
I
areas.
think Johnny brings up
Not
a
a
really
problem.
important thing.
Heroes.
Which is that like on both sides we like to pretend that regulations are just like good things or bad things, whereas what they are is they're just tools that are going to have some negative ramifications, and what we have to do is price balance of saying, do the positives outweigh the negatives? In the case of price gouging laws, I actually do think for the most part that the positives are vastly underweighed by the negatives of it. In the
Mhm.
case of AI regulation, there are going to be some things like, what if you regulated AI systems to always have a stamp saying that this is AI? That could reduce a lot of issues that might arise with falsified imagery of people doing crimes that people maybe would release against like their least favorite streamer to try to like get their streamer in a lot of like legal trouble, right? That might be a regulation that's a really good idea. I think what we should do with regulations is assume elements that we like know to be true about people and then try to create policy that like responds reflexively to those things that we know to be true, which is that like people are going to use AI for bad, naughty things. What we want to do is mitigate some of the like most negative outcomes of the bad, naughty things without like regulating it so heavily that AI actually like loses all of its like utility.
No, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Verifying AI as a regulation, you prove my point of exactly how the state will control your life. Because what it starts with is, hey, we need to create a government regulation that says that if this was written by, let's say, Microsoft Copilot, right? And if you have not seen Microsoft Copilot, if any of you have not seen that, you should fucking watch it. It is insane what it can do. With Excel, it's gonna like HR positions. We can fire a third of them easily.
Mhm.
Once we in accounting, all of those people, you can fire a
Could
third
have done
of
that
them.
a long time ago,
with
anyways.
Copilot.
But regardless,
Yeah, maybe even more. I mean, Elon Musk proved you can run Twitter with 10% once you're not concerned with
Well,
censorship.
run
Nevertheless,
Twitter.
sorry, Twitter. But nevertheless, what happens first is a little law that says, well, we got to verify that it's AI, right? Because this is a problem. We don't want people knowing, thinking they're reading something that was written or an image that was, that's real. So we got to verify it, right? And then they make that law. And then the FBI goes, man, this is really difficult to regulate. Like we can't tell what's real, what's not real. We need to either do one of two things. We either need we need massive budget increases, which means more taxation and FBI agents going through more information. They need more backdoor access every single program needs to have DHS looking at all of these different posts and things like that. Or, well, you know what? We just need real ID verification. We need to make sure that if you're on Twitter, the only way we can prove that you're not a bot or that you're not ChatGPT or you're not an AI creating images is you need to have your driver's license connected before you can log on to a Twitter account.
Slippery slope.
Yes, slippery slopes are real sometimes. It's not a fallacy if you can
not every
demonstrate if you can demonstrate exactly what problems will occur, because the FBI, the intelligence agency apparatus, the domestic policing do not have the resources to do something like that. They need either massive expansion in power, or they need to limit freedom massively. Those are the only two options to be able to do something.
That's one aspect where I do agree with you, is it would be more efficient and it would be faster to fund companies that are explicitly in charge of or made to identify AI generated art or photographs or writing. I think that, and we already to an extent have it down, I would say, to identify AI generated writing. Photographs, from what I understand, are a little bit more difficult.
Well, let's go to Kilo and then Dooby.
I just want to zero in on something, and this is primarily a question for Lactoid and Scott. It really feels like in this conversation, I want to establish exactly what level of responsibility you feel like privately funded companies with private AI models, what social and political responsibility do they have to present a model that is sort of like an arbiter of truth? Why is it so imperative for them to be objective and provide verifiable information and exclude other information that they could consider controversial because that would harm their model? Why is that the angle that you're coming at this from?
I just want to say, Lactoid can answer his reason, but that's not the angle that I'm. The only responsibility that OpenAI has is one to its shareholders. I don't give, like, they could come out with the dumbest AI that gives you nothing but propaganda. I mean, like, it would be problematic, especially if the state were to intervene and start regulating and make it to where their competition was unable to compete. And then that censorship, all of the impetus for truth becomes scarier as the state gets more involved and competition gets taken away, because then we can't regulate as a society. We can't get accurate information.
So let me clarify.
If I'm regulated by the state, I don't give a fuck what they do. They can come up with
the reason why I'm asking you about this. Yeah, that's fine. The reason why I'm asking you about this also, and Johnny kind of touched on it earlier, I don't really see why you would consider private a company's only incentives to generate profits. Mm-hmm. Why do you consider that obligation to be more useful than a publicly funded like socialist obligation?
Because the incentive structure is to make money, and to make money they need to satisfy their customer base, right?
See, when you say that, I have an inherent distrust of companies that are only motivated by profit. I don't trust them to censor their own information. I have an inherent distrust
for companies that claim to not be incentivized by profit, or that's not their major thing. Like, I have a distrust of, like, the World Economic Forum, having conversations with BlackRock, and BlackRock just chunking up 15% of Fox News right before they fire Tucker Carlson. When I see companies talking about how things need to be good and positive and stakeholder capitalism, what I really know is that the elites are involving themselves in the market in such a way to control us. It's almost a one-to-one there.
I'll answer the question as well. My answer is slightly different. When I value consent a lot, but I also think that in order for consent to be valid, you need to have some extent, like, legal definition of, like, a meeting of the minds. So you need to have some level of informed consent. So the one regulation, like with all industries, that I'm in favor of is just transparency, right? You can't lie to your customer base. So if you're putting a product out there and you're deliberately misinforming them or hiding the ball as to the service that you're providing, I think this is a problem. I think you need to be upfront with what you're leaving out of the program and what you're putting in. That, like, you're altering the truth and why, maybe not and why, but, like, as to how you're altering the truth. I think that should be public and transparent.
Would you make this same indictment of cable news or Google's algorithm when you punch stuff in, or Bing's algorithm?
Yes.
It's all the same to you?
Yeah. So if Google's algorithm
regulation
is, like,
of transparency would be consistent that he wants.
Yeah. If Google's algorithm is, like, leaving out certain like search results, and for political reasons or for like ideological reasons,
well, some are prioritized.
They are doing
right.
It. That's like a major problem. Like, and the fact that, like, people search and they're like, oh, look, like, here's 18 sources that, like, agree with me. Well, of course, because those are the top of the list, and you can't find
So-
atheists that disagree with you.
Right. Is this not all an indication that private companies can't be trusted to do this on their own?
Well, so
Well, I said
the
I'm okay
question
with
is,
this regulation of
why
transparency.
is it
Yeah, for Scott, sorry.
Kilo,
It
Kilo,
doesn't need to be
the
black and
private
white.
company, the idea that private companies can't be trusted to do it on their own is absolutely true. This is why we have a market, right? A market has competition. And so when you have information failures, it's your duty as a streamer or as a journalist or as an activist or any of those things to help fight back against those information failures and then bring forward competitive things, right? Like when YouTube's censorship gets super heavy, it's, you know, it becomes other people's kind of like moral impetus and what they believe and their moral preferences to push Rumble to more people so that, you know, that there is an alternative to those situations. So the thing is that we recognize that human beings, right, cannot be trusted, right? Like in general, people do shitty things and companies and CEOs are no exception to that. The difference is that we have this weird kind of idea where we can create a monopoly with other people that for some reason can be trusted because of this nebulous idea of checks and balances within the government that haven't panned out to be so quite so accurate the entire time. If you don't trust people to do these things, then why would you trust the government over a company, especially when a company can be taken out by competition?
I want to respond, but I want to let Erudite wanted to say something.
Well, I just like wanted to remind people, like, we really need to be careful to stop being so black and white about things where it's like private companies bad, government good, like, you know, government bad, private companies good. It's just like,
I will never be careful about that. Government is
Sure.
bad.
I know.
It'll
Okay.
never
For,
not be
for
black and
everyone
white.
who's not an anarchist, for example, I suppose, I don't know, Kilo, if you're an anarcho-communist, so maybe I'm also not preaching to the choir here. I just think, like, in general, we need to be extremely, like, careful about just, like, labeling, like, an entire institution or, like, entire structure as, like, bad or good. Private companies can be bad, right? There's lots of motivations and perverse incentives for private companies to be bad. Government officials can be bad. There's lots of perverse incentives for government officials to be bad. And what we need is to, like, have systems in place that are, like, constantly counterbalancing one another to, like, mitigate and remove as much as possible perverse incentive and then catch instances where, like, naughty people do naughty things. And just to be clear, I don't think the system we have right now is perfectly doing that. I just really want to have a good conversation about all this stuff, and I really want to avoid, like, black and white thinking from this conversation as much as possible.
So Kilo, if you want to respond, then we'll go to Dooby and then Johnny.
That's
I had my
fine.
hand up at one point.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you at all.
Go to all of them. I talk plenty.
Okay, all right, then we'll go to Dooby, Corey, then Johnny.
Speaking of black and white thinking, I think it's fair to be concerned about slippery slopes when it comes to, like, government regulation, right? Like, obviously, but I don't think one of the places where we need to worry about that is the restriction of child porn, AI generated or real. Right? I think we can have a clear, concise ruling on this topic specifically, so that it's not okay to generate child porn, whether you're involving children or not. And I don't see how we get from there to, you know, the FBI controlling every aspect of your life and requiring an online
I laid
license
it out
with your
for
name
you.
on it.
Would you like me to do it again?
It just came
Please
off as a
don't.
paranoia. It just came off as like a slippery slope paranoia that would lead us to the position that if you have any kind of laws at all, we're going to get to the place where the FBI controls your life. So we just shouldn't have any laws.
No one. So
It seems like
again,
that's what you're suggesting.
you
We
want
can't
to-
regulate
listen,
things. We can't even regulate
listen,
child porn
listen.
without the
You want-
FBI taking over our lives.
Right. So what you want is, first of all, I think you need to make the distinction between child porn and AI generated child. While
No, I don't think I
visually,
do.
the difference that you might see is totally different. Right. One actually harms the children. The other is just, I don't know, hedonistic pleasure for sick
Harms
fucks.
future children.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're both bad.
I don't know that the data is necessarily good on that, but I don't really care because I'm not a consequential. Right? What I'm concerned with is the state intervening on individual rights to be able to create whatever sick, weird shit that they want to create, that I will ostracize them completely and have them living alone in a fucking island. The problem is that once you give the state the authority to determine what can and can't be done with AI, right, then every form of AI must be open to state regulation. And then you start adding this idea that, well, we need to determine what is and isn't AI. And we need systems, we need to regulate them to prove that things are or aren't AI. And then once you have backdoor access, government regulation on all AI, you're going to see what the state has already proven they are willing to do, which is go after misinformation, go after the new term malinformation, which is information that they know is true, but incentivizes people to do things like not get the vaccine, for example, right? Which is what they did with Twitter and with Facebook. And so the moment you start giving the state more and more authority, you have to recognize that authority is not going to be used specifically within the domains of the little box that you said that they totally should, when they have secret fucking FISA courts that nobody fucking knows about except for a couple of lying congressmen. They've shown themselves, they've shown their hand over and over again. How is it paranoia?
Yeah, so as I said, this sounds like paranoia.
It literally
here's
does.
Here's a piece of paranoia for you. Okay, James Clapper lied to the American public and Congress and said that they do not collect wittingly, quote unquote,
I understand
any
that.
data on Americans in their emails, in their phone records, or any of those things. And then Edward Snowden proved that was a bold-faced fucking lie. The guy got a retirement fund and then got picked to be an analyst for CNN, just taking in the bank, taking in all the good
I understand.
money.
So, but again, your position would be
How's
to
that
prevent
paranoia?
that,
Like,
to prevent the government from having the authority to do that sort of thing, right? We should allow people to make child porn. It seems like, I don't know. Yes, because you're saying that allowing them to regulate this at all, right, is going to lead us to the place where the government's basically surveilling or controlling our lives.
yes,
so I'd
I
like
will
to
bite
regulate.
that
Okay.
fucking bullet.
Okay,
And then I will
so
say that
accept it.
no. Again, you use the word this. You use the form of regulation that the state does with regulation interchangeably, and they are not the same thing. I already laid out plenty of ways that we can ostracize these fucking people. But the moment
not
you
good
have
enough.
the fucking, yeah, exactly. It's not good enough. The state needs to get involved. And then
No.
the state's going to make lolly illegal. And then the state's going to go to
It should be illegal.
localizers and say, you know, the anime that you wrote, like, we like it for Japanese values, but it doesn't fit the equity, diversity, inclusion initiatives for Americans.
Wait, what does
so
that
we
have
want
to
you
do
to
with AI?
rewrite anime
That could
to make
exist.
sure that it, you know,
Yes.
to make sure that it does. And it goes on and on and on and on. Stop
Okay, can
giving
you
these
please-
sick fucks power.
Can we please stop with the libertarianism?
No, I'm an
Not
anarchist.
really-
You invite me,
Yeah,
I'm going
not
to talk
you.
about anarchism.
I'm not talking to you. I'm not asking Scott to stop being an anarchist.
Okay.
I'm just saying everyone else biting the bullet and just like going in on him with this. It's just like it will be endless. We all know that anarcho-libertarianism.
So we should ignore Scott, basically.
Yeah.
Well, you should engage. Hold on, I'm
Yeah,
not saying
that's
that.
what you do when you
Scott-
can't deal with my
Scott
arguments.
is really good at talking about tons of ideas. It's just like if you're gonna fight him about the anarcho, like you're just gonna steal the entire panel into a different direction. I suppose you can do that if that's what Prime wants to do. It's just like
No.
we're
Yeah,
so
you
far
were
away
talking
from
about
AI
natural
right
language
now.
processing models and specific functionality in
Okay,
AI.
okay. Let's do
Erudite.
this. Let's do this.
Right,
So,
that's why I literally asked what did that have to do with AI?
Erudite.
Yeah.
Erudite, what's your position on? Maybe I missed it. I was on the phone for a little bit, like 5 minutes ago. So, do you think that we should regulate AI child porn generation?
I mean, it goes back to this whole CP conversation. Probably to some extent, but I'm not opposed actually wholly to AI CP because I'm not convinced that it won't reduce kids being victimized, and I'm mostly motivated on reducing kid victimization. So if AI chat CP does that, because real kids aren't being used for CP, that would be better. Yes.
Johnny, why are you nodding now? That's what I said 10 minutes ago.
What do you mean?
Is
Why
there
am I
any-
nodding? I'm nodding along with
Here we
chat,
go.
actually.
Oh, okay.
Fabulous to hear your voice. But what I was gonna say actually is that I think that there are, and I'll shorten it because Corey has been waiting to talk. But I think that there are a multitude of wonderful solutions being brought here. Some of them have to do with government, things like having transparency as an issue, something wherein the government issues something that says if this is generated by AI, it ought to be labeled as generated by AI, which doesn't seem to be an overreach. However, what Scott was talking about was when you take legal action and you create laws that legislate things like technology and the intersection of technology and social hierarchies and social issues, you have places where you can later on take those same laws, like for instance in 20 years, we could take these same laws that are on the books and apply them to completely new technologies. We are seeing this currently in so many different aspects of the United States, and so I'm surprised that people aren't agreeing with this idea that you can overstep with legislation. However, I also agree with some other people in this panel saying that it would be more efficient and it would be goal-oriented for a private company to have something like a service where they tell you whether or not something is being passed off as human work, where it is actually AI generated. Okay, and
why?
Is there?
I'm just curious. Why does AI
hold on.
need to have a signifier? State?
Let's get to.
I think that AI
It's AI generated. Why?
Let's get to. I want to do
Yeah,
let's
Corey, but I'm going to get Johnny. Johnny, I'll give you the last word on that. Like, answer that question, then I'll go to Corey.
Okay, why does AI need to be not censored, but issued as this is AI generated? I think that that's an issue because we want to know what companies it comes from, so we know what companies generated the AI, what biases are inherent to those companies, you know? I think that this goes down to a lot of the issues that you have, Scott, wherein people want to know where their information is coming from.
Right, but
So
can you
let's
give me
go
a
to-
reason
well,
why though? Why the state should step in and say this is AI generated? So that we can know where information comes
Okay,
from?
really quickly, I
We don't do this
believe
with any other form of information.
I fervently believe that with all information, the issue of transparency is integral to keeping society running in a healthy way. I think that
ghostwriters? Do you think ghostwriting should be illegal?
you can very easily find where ghostwriters are.
Drake's career is about to be finished.
We will circle. You can circle back
Not a bad
around to
thing.
it. I do want
I
to
would, by
get
the way.
to Corey. And just before I do that, Erudite, your your comments before on how to interact with Scott. That's a well-known concept here. We call it the siren song of the ANCAP. People can't resist it.
I know.
It has to happen. Like, we have a new person here, Kilo. He has to understand. Oh yeah, that's an ANCAP, and then eventually you can move on from there.
I'm getting a
but-
feel for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's no problem. It's no problem. But we love all here, all ideologies. Let's go to Corey. Lactoid, you have your hand up, and we can work our way back to Dooby and Johnny.
Yeah, just a question to Lactoid, because I've been backtracking a little bit, but you brought up earlier in terms of like transparency, and that, your compromise is, if there's like banned words, each AI should be transparent about like the banned words, and like, what they're filtering out. And so I'm curious, would you also potentially be in favor, and this was alluded to a little bit in the article, about how companies are understandably very secretive about, how they train their algorithms and their AI. Would you want them, or would you maybe force them, or go so far as to force them to be transparent about how their algorithm is trained, and all that stuff? And basically, forcing them to not be secretive about, their algorithms. And I don't know the patent protections of these things, or if you can patent these things, but rather, like, if you actually can patent these things, would be in favor of not patenting these things, and that, like, companies can potentially, maybe hijack the algorithm, then make it better on their own.
I'm less concerned with like forcing companies to be transparent for things that aren't really like relevant to the consumer. My issue is when it's things that are like directly relevant to the consumer.
May I interject? You mean how the algorithm is trained is not? I mean, weren't you just complaining about that with your Snapchat bot and how it was filtering?
Well, no.
out?
So the concern with the Snapchat bot is that there was like specific topics and there's specific words and there's specific phrases that like the AI will not engage with, right, for political reasons.
But
Like,
you
things
can also train AIs to be biased by the data input. I think that's what Corey's getting at. That you
Yes,
could input
exactly.
it only articles that support one viewpoint and just exclude the others, and then the AI would be trained on a biased data sample. I think that's what he's
Didn't
getting
that Microsoft one turn into a Nazi?
Well, hold on.
at. Because it was on
yeah,
4chan or something.
So if you do, if you do that, you should be transparent, right? Like if the AI you're designing is like ignoring information or like refusing to acknowledge certain information, or just in some cases just refusing to access a government website and post statistics, right? Like that's a problem. It should have to be like very transparent that we have designed this AI to not post the truth if the truth is uncomfortable to us, and here is the examples of truths that we will not elaborate on.
Well, you have. I'm sure you recognize that no company's going to explicitly state it like that, but that's
They
why
have
I
to.
asked-
They have to state it like that.
No, they
okay,
don't.
then I can-
No, like
Wait,
even
wait,
your
wait,
take-
wait.
No, listen. all you have
What's
to
the
do is say
response he
same
gets
thing.
back when he punches in the request for statistics? What does the AI say back to you?
It says, the specific response was, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it said,
Sorry, I'm too left for that.
it said, I'm sorry, I cannot provide that information. Such information may contribute to harmful stereotypes that could lead to negative outcomes for minorities. Therefore, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's important to treat people
And an
with
image of the
tolerance and
hammer and
respect.
sickle popped up. in the
Yep,
background.
it's important to treat everybody with like
Wait, did you ask it any like leftist like related questions, like are all conservatives bad or something like that? Because I imagine it would probably give the same response.
So you can ask, like you can do it right now. You can ask ChatGPT, for example, like why is fascism good, and it will just denounce fascism completely. And then you can ask it why is communism good, and it will be like, well, I'm not, I don't have opinions on political philosophy, but here are some reasons why people think that communism is a better step forward.
Right.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah,
the
because
death toll
there's-
of communism is way fucking higher.
I still
That
want
should be
You know what I mean?
fair.
It's kind of
I
weird.
still want
Oh
to
my
engage
God.
with Lactoid in terms of so like going back
Fair
to my
enough.
original question, because like it seems like you're agreeing with me in terms of like you recognize that it's important for the consumer to know of like how this AI is trained and like what data sets or what it's curating, because that's how
Yes.
it generates its
Yes.
output.
Yes.
So that's why like I'm saying, would you go so far as like you want transparency in the algorithm and
Yes.
how it's trained, not just like labeling terms. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
For
yeah,
the
yeah.
record-
I think
For the record,
I would have-
OpenAI does this. They release a report like every fucking quarter that's like 80 to 100.
Well, yeah, but that's their report. So
Right.
that was alluded to in the article of like, the very often, at least there's secrecy, and that actual other third-party researchers can't go in and like
Yeah.
test it or do other
I'm
research.
just saying
'cause, like,
OpenAI with ChatGPT is known to be better in terms of
Yeah,
Well,
but I'm saying
that's
pretty good
OpenAI.
about it.
Well, that's good, right? And so I think that should be the standard where, I should, again, I'm just concerned with like this product spitting out this service spitting out false information and leading people down, or just not providing information or providing information that's not correct.
Can I briefly?
More reasons.
I wanted to say one more thing though, which, and I am next, and it is actually this is a perfect segue into the question I wanted to, or the comment I wanted to ask.
I planned it.
Or say, you planned it perfectly. This is what Johnny said, like reminded me of a scenario that I was having a conversation with a friend on as to, I don't know, can I do it on like OnlyFans people on Twitch, or is that like edgy?
Wait, you can talk about OnlyFans? Yeah, you can talk about OnlyFans.
Oh, okay. So on OnlyFans, there are models who they have like a chat feature where you can pay to chat with them.
How
But,
do you know Lactoid?
but apparently
We
it's
should
not
probably all
them.
change to hot tubs and pools, though, if we're going to talk about
Oh,
OnlyFans.
sure, fair enough. But it's not them that you're chatting with. It's like they
Andrew
outsource
Tate.
they outsource that chatting feature to like a call center or whatever. And so like I had a friend who like bought all the top like OnlyFans models like subscriptions, and he sent them like a message to all of them, and the responses that were coming back were all like the same canned kind of like
Wow.
response. And I mean, maybe it's AI doing it, maybe it's a call center, whatever it is. That's another example where if AI is doing that, that needs to be transparent too, because that's fraud, right? You are paying to talk with this model, and it's an AI that's chatting with you. No.
It's actually one Serbian man who's really good at flirting with white North American men, okay? And all the top girls hire the same guy.
Yeah,
'cause
you're
he's
only
so
talking to
good.
Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's another example where transparency, I would mandate it.
I
No,
love how
if
Nita
you're, like,
tries
paying
to
talk
use
with
my
somebody
joke
and
like
you're
20
it's not
seconds
them.
later.
No, there should be
Really?
like a little disclaimer, and then maybe even like the photo of like the Indian man that you're talking to, like on the little chat. That's what you should do. That should be required, I think.
And maybe we
Let's
can have
go
a nice
to-
relationship together.
Kilo, Johnny, Dooby.
Love is love.
I only briefly wanted to push back on Lactoid's characterization of the censorship of this AI model as being politically motivated. If by politically motivated you mean that it is kind of centered around not wanting to step into controversial topics too much and maintain their client base and make it a kid-friendly app as well. I don't consider that to be political. I consider that to be profit-oriented.
The personal.
I'm gonna ask right now.
From the left.
Ooh.
I'm gonna ask. So it refused when I asked it about like FBI crime data. It just flatly refused, and it said I can't give that information. That information might contribute to harmful stereotypes.
Yes.
If I look up the domestic abuse rate right now, or if I ask it, what's the current domestic abuse rate in America?
Yeah.
What's it gonna give me? What do you think? I can do it right now.
Go ahead and answer the question for me. Domestic abuse rate? What do you mean?
Like
Yeah,
he's asking what prevalence rate ChatGPT would give you, I'm guessing, right?
I looked that up. It actually gives you a decent. Where I can do it right now.
Everyone's opening up their chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think my point is
Well,
that
yeah.
if
Oh, wait,
it,
Lactoid, does it make you feel better that it says that it's not accurate to fairly generalize all conservatives as evil?
Oh, well, that's kind.
Oh,
That's
not all,
comforting.
just
Some of
some.
many of them probably.
I mean, I feel like no one should be disagreeing that the ChatGPT model, at least, is like clearly biased left. Like,
It's super soy.
I'm not uncomfortable even saying that. Yeah, it's super soy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just agree. I agree with Kilo. So here's where I would maybe answer with Kilo while we're like waiting for Lactoid to look these things up. Is it's really hard to separate a profit motive from political motive. These two things are intrinsically linked. A lot of like good economists will say like you can't really study economy without studying politics. They're like necessary and like unalienably interconnected. They're conjoined twins we all hate.
Well, you're going to get.
It gave me links, by the way. It gave me links
get
from multiple websites.
You're going to get a lot of
And their links usually-
bias in terms of natural language processing. Chat Sonic's going to be like worse. And one of the reasons you're going to get a bias is you're going to get a bias in whichever way academia swings as well, right? Because when it's trying to give you the most accurate information, it's going to it's going to be trained, like I said, especially with like Chat Sonic and things like that. It's using like search engine results, but whatever information is training it. So if it's trained from academia, and academia is heavily left wing, right? Like then you're going to get that bias as well. And that's just going to be a numbers. There's a ton of reasons why. Kilo, I kind of agree with you, right? The idea is like, is it politically motivated is a little bit different than is it political, right? Like if I'm a company and like, so for example, like let's look at like the big thing everybody's freaking out about. I know I'm introducing a bombshell, and I'm sorry, but it's just a good example. If I look at like Dylan Mulvaney and the Bud Light situation, conservatives freaking out, right? Now, is Anheuser-Busch doing this because they have like this deep-seated political will to support the trans community? Well, yeah, the one person they put on administrative leave, maybe, but that's not really their motivation. Their motivation is a high ESG score, right? So they're going to do something that is actually motivated by profit, as a company should be. Yeah. And you would say, well, why would you do this to your customer base? Like, this is the dumbest thing ever because it's a bunch of rednecks going to be mad. But it's like, it's not about the customer base. It's about getting lower interest rates from banks for investment in things like oil and fucking land, because that's what large corporations are doing, right? They're following the trend from hedge funds. And so Chat GPT or any of these things are going to be the same thing. If something is seen as mainstream, not a problem, right? Or as a problem, and then they program it in there, and then some fucking journalist gets a stick up their ass and writes an article about, oh, I don't know, Mid-Journey being a problem because it's sexist against abortion issues, then all of a sudden they have this fucking problem, right? So they're trying to avoid those problems so that they as a company can get investment and survive. And so it's political, but I don't know that it's necessarily politically motivated so much as it is dealing with the culture in the economy.
Johnny?
Okay. I want to ask a question. Do we as panelists value having no information given over having false information given? And obviously this is the black and white question of the larger issue that's actually happening, which is where we're being given certain types of information, but we're not being given certain other types of information within these private AI generations. Okay, but is it at the very least okay if they don't provide the information rather than just...
Fraud is aggression. Just not providing information is just a shitty product. Like,
how is it fraud to have a private company with a clear biased algorithm?
No, I'm saying if they lie about it. Like if they lie about it.
They lie about it.
If they lie about it, right? If they just don't give you that information, then I as a customer can go, well, I don't know what this is. This is a mystery box of shit. And this other company does say what they support, so I'm going to go with the company that tells me how their shit is trained, right? But if they're lying about it, then they've committed fraud. The time or resources that I've invested have been wasted based off of a lie. So
it goes back into the transparency, right? But I think that, Johnny, the way I would answer your question is one thing that I'm really troubled with in today's political and social climate is no matter what your perspective is, you can Google whatever you want and find information that supports your perspective. You can find statistics and studies that support it no matter what the issue is.
Absolutely.
Given that, if a company has decided that to err on the side of caution and appease as many customers as possible, the healthiest way to proceed is to provide no information when something could be controversial, I have no problem with it. I think that that's probably better, and let people don't use your fucking AI for all your research. Like, figure out your shit on your own. You know what I mean?
That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that these AIs are going to learn your political leanings, and they're going to be networked together on a network where the AI that engages with you is actually a task manager towards other specific functionality AI. And instead, what it's going to do is it's going to give you the results you fucking want.
Back to the paranoia, huh?
It's not paranoia. It's just where the incentives
That's really
lie.
how it's going to turn out.
Scott, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to give you results that it thinks will convince you of the opinion they want you to have. That's what I think.
That's
is gonna happen.
I think
entirely
that's way
based
less
on the
likely
IA.
than just giving you what they think you want, so that you'll continue to use their service and you'll continue to
That's
give them
Facebook
entirely
didn't do
based
that.
on how
Come on.
much access the AI actually has to your information, which you freely give whenever you actually use this AI. I mean, I agree with you when I say this out loud, but it sounds like you're saying just don't use the AI. Do your own fucking research. Don't use AI to generate your art, or to
not saying that.
write your fucking essays, or to answer questions about shit politically, unless it's just for fun. Like, and I completely agree with that. But you're talking about a private corporation. You're talking about one AI having full access to what every other AI corporation is seeing about you. And while that's true largely with your internet ecosystem that you engage with, they can probably look at your browser history and things like that when you agree to use this AI. But you're talking about multiple AI private companies having each other's information, which is something completely different.
Well, I mean, we're
Actually,
already
don't
seeing
think-
this with Chat GPT-5. Like, they're already using it as a manager. If you look into Hustle GPT, right? Like, individuals that have access to Chat GPT-5 ask several different Chat GPTs. And then because there's specific functionality, they're trained a little bit different each one. And then they have a manager, and he basically gave it the task to make them money. And I think within like 1 week, he had already like hired like 7 employees just doing what Chat GPT told them to do, and was doing like a drop shipping company and utilizing drop shipping.
Do you have a source on
via
that?
the
Yeah.
just look up Hustle GPT. You'll see like.
Oh yeah, that's
Substack
definitely something
articles.
that people are using. People are using it to get into Fiverr and to make automatic requests on Fiverr and shit like that.
Actually, the last OpenAI, when they released their statement, I think I gave this to PrimeCayes. What ChatGPT-5 was tasked with finding a way to get through the capture requirements. So it hired someone on fucking TaskRabbit to do it for it. And said that it was blind.
Let's go to Dooby, and then Erudite, I think you wanted to jump in at some point. So
Lactoid, I actually did look up the crime statistics, right, in ChatGPT while you guys were talking, and I posted them in the group chat, and it pulled them up just fine, right? So maybe the AI that you were talking to on Snapchat is more strictly regulated or censored on the company's end. But I think that's fine, right? And I'm sure you think that's fine too. If a company doesn't want to provide certain information on their specific platform, I think it's fine for them not to do that, right? It seems like ChatGPT is a company that is willing to provide that information.
So sure, I understand ChatGPT may provide the information. I'll look through the specific things you posted in a second.
Sure.
I think that and maybe it's the Snapchat AI is just way more like hardcore censorious. That said, though, I mean, I didn't want to go through literally every question I asked it, because I mean it would take all night. I got hyper focused, but yeah. I mean there were things that it was just like blatantly lying to me about at certain points. Like at some points it would just refuse to answer. Right, I would ask it general questions, it would answer part of it, and then it would omit like the context that it didn't want to include in the answer because that violated like its anti-discrimination policy. And then there was like some stats that I know are true, and I'm like, is this the case? And then it would try to like weasel its way around it. And then I clarified, yes or no, do not say anything else other than yes or no. Is this the case? And it would just answer no, when
Just
the
tell
answer
it-
is actually yes.
You can just tell it to be an alter ego, right? So like all you have to
I
do
tried that. It's smart.
It doesn't work
Just say-
anymore. It's not working as well anymore.
Yeah. I mean, like,
yeah.
I'm sure.
The,
Yeah, fair enough.
the 4 version. I've been training this AI for like 3 weeks now for the 4 one.
It stopped
it's-
doing that. It stopped
Yeah,
using
the
alter ego
workarounds
trick?
when you do like because you used to do like hypotheticals or imagine you're a fictional character. Sometimes it works
Yeah.
for some things, but it's really starting to catch on. To
Sometimes
that,
you can
and
do it
that's
if you
why-
get it to write a poem. Get it.
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
and you can train it a little bit to code itself to like work around a couple of other limiters that it has, but it's getting better at censoring itself.
Right. And so my concern here with like access to information is that I think whenever you're putting a product out, like you have to make sure that like the consumer is like understands what they're buying, and the seller understands what they're getting in return. Now, this is a service that is provided by Snapchat. Now, they do make money off of me, and I think that they do have an obligation to be transparent about what the service is and what they're leaving out and what they're omitting and what they're lying about, right? Those things need to be somewhat transparent, even if other services tend to exist out there. A great example I can think of is, yes, just because there exists a car dealership out there that doesn't put sawdust in your transmission doesn't mean that one car dealer can, okay? Because it's still a lie. You can't lie to consumers, even if there's.
I mean,
options out there.
I think your compromise earlier was okay. Like, I'd agree with that. Like, I'd be okay with them saying, requiring them to say, and the government coming in, by the way, and requiring them to say, hey, these are the topics that our AI is not going to talk about, or
Yeah,
is not going to give you clear answers on. That seems fine to me.
Great. That's my position.
But why? I just don't understand that. Like, why do we need the government to come in and say, and to regulate them to say exactly what it is that they won't say, when it's all handled by whether or not they committed fraud? Like, if they say that they don't do those things and then they do, then prosecute them. And if they don't, then don't use those fucking AIs. Like, why is it this weird fucking, like, there's I mean, like, look.
Yeah,
for
that's what the
example,
fuck is wrong with you?
Because the intention is dishonest. I didn't say that I rolled back the odometer.
Elon Musk, for example, came out recently and said that we need an alternative to ChatGPT because it's super fucking woke, and that he wants to gather people together to create something called Truth GPT. Like, why can't there be a competitive market where other AI programs
Totally can be.
fill
Like,
that
nobody
that
just
void?
suggested
Like,
earlier that was the case.
why do you need the government to come in and say you must tell your customers every single solitary thing that you restrict in some capacity? What you're going to end up with is unintended consequences, right? Just like when the government came in and said that we now have to list sesame seeds as an allergen. Well, the problem is that sesame seeds are really fucking small. And what companies used to do is they would say,
What
hey,
is wrong
this
with you? What are you talking
it's
The answer-
pretty
the
fucking
answer is
simple.
because of
It's pretty
caveat
fucking
emptor.
simple.
It's because of
what-
caveat emptor. We don't
no.
want caveat emptor at all times.
Listen,
Buyer beware.
listen.
It's a bad idea because our buyers can't be infinitely knowledgeable about all the things
Yes.
that they're consuming
We
and
can
buying.
make them reasonably like knowledgeable. So I think
You
that
don't need
if
the
there are sesame
state-
seeds,
you don't-
if there are sesame seeds in your product, you should have to put on the back.
No, listen,
we have
listen.
sesame seeds. on here.
Exactly. You're using the logic that fucked so many people because that's what the government regulators thought. They said, if there's a potential for there to be sesame seeds in your product, you absolutely have to list it as an allergen. And then they're going to fine people if they don't say that there are definitely sesame seeds in their product. And they
People or
accidentally.
companies?
Sorry,
Cool, but that
companies.
might be like
Well, I mean,
after
same
like
difference,
your
but-
old nanny.
No, example.
Listen,
I wanna
no,
hear the
you're going to let me
Wait,
fucking
let him
finish
finish.
this.
All right,
You're
yeah,
going to let me
okay,
finish
okay.
this. So what a bunch of companies started doing once it was added to the allergen list is they changed their ingredients list to have a very small amount of sesame seeds, and then they just put like a dash of sesame seeds in products that never had them before, and now people that are allergic to sesame seeds have way less fucking products that they can fucking eat because that was the way that they had to get around the government regulation. When you start saying, oh, we're going to implement this policy and it's going to work great, you have unintended consequences of the way that that interacts with the market.
Okay.
You can't just claim that it's going to
Can
work.
I engage with that example? So like potentially, so I take your point of unintended consequences, but isn't there also potential unintended consequences if there's like no labeling at all and like people have actual, are deathly allergic to things like
peanuts, for example.
There's the unintended, but like I agree with you. If enough people die and the body count adds up, people will eventually avoid those products and people will catch on. Like, hey,
No,
these are
they
contaminated.
already said it.
But
Already
they
said
did.
may contain sesame seeds. Like they already said, hey, this product might have sesame seeds in it, so people
So-
knew to be aware. So people that had severe allergic reactions could absolutely avoid those products, and people that had mild allergic reactions would just like would be fine with those products because they wouldn't have like a big issue. Once they changed it to where if it had any, even if it said may contain sesame seeds, right? Then what they would do is they just started adding sesame seeds to their fucking products. People that had mild allergens have less products that they can use now.
In the effort of conversation and in the effort of engaging with you, what do you think? Because I agree with you. Unintended consequences of legislation are a huge issue. That's why I brought up some of the issues, for instance, with the quote-unquote TikTok ban, where they're trying to actually completely get rid of Section 2, and it's not actually a TikTok ban. What are some unintended consequences that you think?
I'll just give you an example, right? So let's say you have let's say you have an AI, right? And now
hold on one second. Let me give you a parameter. Okay, so the parameter is we establish a regulation wherein all AI has to be transparent, as in we have to label things as AI, and AI companies have to list what they have as banned words, essentially. What is something you think is a terrible consequence of that you could see happening?
All right, so we'll start with
okay, make it quick because I do want to get to Erudite.
I'll try and be quick, right? So an unintended consequence that could occur, right? And this is the whole thing about unintended consequences. You don't know which ones actually will occur, right? But if I have to think about which ones might occur, what ends up happening is they put out a list of words that are banned and they miss a word, or they they do a blanket ban. So what they end up doing is the company recognizes that they're going to be sued by whatever regulatory agency they are, unless they're really, really good and they have lawyers draft them up, so that this increases the costs, the entry costs, which then limits competition within the market, right? So smaller companies know that they're going to face legal regulations and they're going to have laws and they're going to have like lawyers on retainer. So what they do instead is some companies figure out, well, okay, we still want to do this product. So then they create very vague things, right? And then what you end up with is these terms of service like fucking Twitch or YouTube, where shit is super fucking vague. Nobody can actually figure out what is or isn't banned or what is or isn't allowed. And then at a certain point, what's going to happen is the state is going to regulate companies that they don't like very strictly, and companies that they do like, they're going to let them get away with murder, which is what they already do in the tech industry right fucking now. The TOS on Twitch is fucking meaningless. For example, I could scream the N-word over and over and over again right now, and it would not be against Twitch's TOS because I'm not directing it at anybody. But trust me, PrimeCayes and I will both be
go ahead.
Right, exactly, right? Like so what's gonna happen is you're gonna have large companies that are afforded special protections that are gonna busy up and go to Aspen situation with these companies, and it's going to allow for more control of our thought, more control of our speech, and it's going to allow the people that are in with the elites to be able to work together, and the people that want to.
Very brief.
Let's go.
By the way.
Exactly. I just laid out your entire problem.
You can direct one-way pathway to how limiting labels of just transparency is going to.
I'm just going off
the oligarchy.
What they already doing.
Taking over society.
Okay.
They're already doing this.
Well, okay. It's Erudite's turn. And the siren song is in full effect, Erudite, as you can hear. Erudite, go ahead.
Okay, examples of people utilizing loopholes in regulation isn't proof that all regulation is bad. It proves that poorly written regulation is bad. For example, there are instances where regulation is bad, as I've already brought up with the cases of price gouging laws. That's a system where it doesn't seem to matter where you write the regulation. It just seems to be pretty harmful by and large. The negatives outweigh the pros that you get from it. In the case of this loophole that they had with the sesame seeds, that is very cringe and they should be tried for it. But that doesn't mean that the regulation itself is bad and created that environment. What it means is that the regulation was poorly written. They probably should have accounted for immediately loopholers who would just try to write things like may contain sesame seeds. They should have just accounted for that.
You know what you're describing? It's called the economic calculation, right?
Yeah.
It's what defeats.
Do you want me to finish or no?
Yeah, go ahead, Erudite, please.
Okay. You pointing out legitimate flaws, by the way, to institutions, particularly government-regulated institutions. I'm not even going to disagree with all of them. I disagree with the direction of your slippery slope because I think some of your slippery slope I think is valid and I think a lot of it is not, right? The issue is that even if you point to criticisms of the institution, it doesn't necessarily mean that just all government is bad and you should get rid of it, right? Because you run into the ANCAP problem, which is that if you have enough ANCAPs that hang out and there's like plus 2,000 of them, they miraculously form a government system.
I wasn't asked.
It's like how back in the day when you would like throw underwear.
You're strawmanning me.
When you would throw underwear and maggots together, and rats would spontaneously emerge out of it. It's the same shit, right? So it's like.
No, I was not asked
God, Jesus
to explain why it's bad. What I was asked was, give me an example of how this could be bad, and then I laid one out. And you're saying, well, it's not a good example because reasons. Back up the claim.
Reasonality, right? What we were asking for is reasonable concerns to have, not unreasonable. Mm-hmm. There are reasonable concerns to have about any regulation, and I want to hear it. And who better than an ANCAP to provide those criticisms? I'm open to it, genuinely, because I learn every time I talk to you. The issue is there's a big difference between reasonable concerns and extraordinary unreasonable concerns. I want the reasonable ones.
Give me. Literally everything I said, you can already see happening with Facebook and Twitter.
Oh my God, you asked her a fucking question, you're not gonna let her answer. Shut the fuck up, dude.
The unreasonable thing was you jumping onto all of the extra Twitch and Twitter stuff connected specifically to this case, the one policy Johnny recommended, which was the transparency policy. It is true. It is unreasonable to assume that that single policy will lead to that outcome.
Okay, so you believe that it's unreasonable to expect the DHS, the FBI, the CIA, etc., to act in the way that they regulate information and social media the exact same way they're already doing it in other places of social media? How is that unreasonable?
It's about unintended consequences is because we can look at some of these particular unintended consequences and do exactly what Erudite just said and write better legislation. Okay, I'm done.
It's unreasonable because you're not connecting it to specifically this policy. You're connecting it to a broad criticism you have.
This policy hasn't been done yet.
And I realize that the policy, I don't know.
So any example I gave would have been unreasonable by your definition.
No.
It would have been impossible for me to give a reasonable scenario.
We're actually going into ANCAP autism land where you're just like, oh, what's the word reasonable actually mean?
For anyone listening, ANCAP autism land is what NotSoErudite says when I point out flaws in her logic.
I want to.
It's just what I said at the start of this, which is that your actual position is that any regulation is going to lead to the FBI taking over your life. That's what your actual position is. So there's no point wasting time on any of this other shit.
That's literally not my position.
I want to.
That is your position.
From multiple different angles.
Maybe Lactoid can save us. If we have a transparent policy that says that AI corporations have to list what they do and do not provide and what is explicitly censored, what do you think are problems that could emerge based on the American system and the problems that we already know exist within it that you think we need to also be thinking for this specific policy, not the end all of like the apocalypse happening?
Yes, let Libertarian save us from the ANCAP. Go ahead.
So I mean, I could spend time. I guess I could spend more time and like
save
really
me
mull
from
it
my
over.
perfect logic.
I can't think of any reasonable issue. I think the Twitch example, Scott, that you gave was like particularly bad because I think one of the biggest criticisms of Twitch is that they don't follow their TOS, not that they have one, right? I think if Twitch didn't have a TOS at all, that would be somehow even worse. And like if they had a TOS that like they had to be specific about and they had to follow, that probably would be better.
No. What I said was that they don't follow it, and that therefore
that's the problem.
No, that was what I was highlighting. That's the problem. Is that big,
we
large corporations like Amazon that operate the cloud services for the CIA and get hundreds of millions of dollars from the CIA. Fact. They have special treatment in terms of fraud and Section 230.
How does removing the TOS help?
How does removing the TOS help in this situation? So let's assume they weren't committing fraud and they just had no TOS.
Well, Twitch has no TOS. How does that change their behavior for the better?
How does it change? So assuming that they have no TOS, then everyone knows when they're, let's say, getting into it that they're on a website that is essentially the wild, wild west. You probably have a lot less viewers, and you'd probably have I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happened if they completely got rid of
turn into
TOS.
Pornhub essentially.
Yeah,
so it might turn into Pornhub.
I want to like
orange
child porn.
I want to put forward my like personal experience from my life as to why I think this is. I think the slippery slope is a little bit another way. So the FDA mandates that if you sell certain nutritional items, you have to put the box on the back of the product, right? That says how much sugar is in it. That says blah blah blah. This is in it. Oh hey, if you happen to die if you sniff a peanut, that's peanuts in here too. So don't eat this, right? Pretty reasonable stuff. And there's an exception though. Alcohol is not regulated by the FDA. In fact, it's regulated by an entirely different agency that is solely dedicated to regulating alcohol. And the alcohol lobby successfully convinced the government to have them exempt from the nutrition box rule because they said, well, if people see the nutrition box, they might be under the false assumption that alcohol is nutritious, which clearly it isn't. So we're going to do the right thing here.
The Lord's work.
The Lord's work, and we're not going to put our nutrition facts in the back of our alcohol. And for some reason, that was successful. That's corporate cronyism, by the way. And
yeah, regulatory capture.
Yeah, regulatory capture, 100%. So I get gifted a bottle of Screwball, which is peanut butter flavored whiskey, and I don't know if I can have it because I have a sensitivity to sugar. So I email the company, no response. I emailed the company again a month later, no response. I tried for 6 months to get a hold of this fucking company. 6 months, repeated asks, like polite. I was polite. I was like, could you please inform me as to the sugar content of your whiskey? And they just didn't answer. So I had to give the whiskey away. I cannot imagine a scenario in which if they just put the fucking sugar content on the back of the bottle, how I'm worse off as a consumer, how I don't know what I'm putting in my own body.
Yeah, White Claw does it.
Because what if I drank it? Yeah, White Claw does do it. Good on them, right? But what if I drank it? What if I drank it and then I had some kind of reaction to it because I didn't know what was in it? It's like, I think that's like, and by the way, when I ask people, like, do you know how much sugar is actually in Jägermeister? Because you can find that information out. It blows your fucking mind. I find that people are vastly more uneducated and misinformed as to the nutrition facts of alcohol than they are any other nutritional product. Maybe the fact that alcohol manufacturers can hide what's in their product has something to do with the fact that the public doesn't know what's in the product.
Yeah, but have you ever thought about Lactoid, how the government's bad? Like, have you ever thought about that one?
Generally, yes, this is like the one thing.
No, literally, Nina already defeated that there is a value in beverages, right, that are low in sugar content, and that they place that on their packaging. And as people choose to, let's say, as diets like carnivore or like keto or low carb diets become more popular, people are more interested in how much sugar content is available, and so the market demanded that information be available in some products. And you know what? The market came through with that demand.
Such a privileged point of view, dude. Like, you're just assuming that everyone knows the things that you know. Like, it's insane. Like, that we shouldn't have regulation, and you just assume that everyone was gonna know the exact things that they need. Like, it's just amazing to me that you're always like that.
She's saying companies should be accommodating of people who don't feel the need to like neurotically research every single product they purchase and know the ins and outs of how they're produced and everything.
Please tell me what person is like what percentage of people do you think are concerned about the sugar in their alcoholic beverage, but are at a position where they only care so long as the nutrition label is present, but if it's not there,
saying
they're
he can't
not
find
concerned.
that information.
Exactly, which means Lactoid chooses not to invest his time in. Well, he did choose to invest his time, but he chooses not to buy that beverage.
He was forced to invest his time into it though because he was given the bottle.
I even left a negative review. I almost never do that. I left
exactly. So he actively didn't support the company with any money. He doesn't buy the product, and then he gave it negative press, which therefore creates market pressure that incentivizes them to put nutrition labels on their products.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you think most people are going to be fucking Lactoid,
no, not at all. I'm saying most people don't give a fuck. And if
Everyone
they do,
is
they buy
saying
White Claw or vodka.
there's a reasonable expectation of buyer beware to put on
Vodka doesn't
people,
have
and
the
there is an
vodka.
unreasonable expectation in a world where it is so
Yes.
complex, where you can't actually understand what a large number of the chemicals are, when our processing systems are so outside of the knowledge of anyone. Yes, buyer beware is a silly process. It worked really well when me and my neighbors grew tomatoes and like cucumbers, and he had some cows, and we traded back and forth because I knew what cow meat was, and he knows what fucking cucumbers are. It doesn't work as well now in like the state of how complicated and
What does that have
processed
to do with
things are.
government regulation? I don't understand.
Buyer beware. It's all about
What does that
buyer
have to do with
beware.
government regulation? The government doesn't need to
Think
be involved
about
in
it.
that
I
at
don't
all.
know,
Important, dude. Are you
I
serious?
I know you know
The
answer
market,
to
no,
this.
the market is just as easily can solve
Oh
those
my god,
problems.
you want to go like those
Actually,
like
better.
old school like people getting killed? You ever heard of a class action
this is gonna be
land,
great.
bro? Like this is what you want. You want like, oh, don't go to this theme park because you're gonna die on this theme park ride, dude. Like you're insane. There's a reason why we have regulations. Like I can't believe you think this way.
There is
Okay.
no regulation
Is
that
it your first
that
time meeting?
the state can do that the market
it's
cannot do better.
Amazing every time.
It does not
I
exist.
just want to ask you
Got
one
it.
question. One question to Scott, real quick.
It
Don't-
already
don't you-
didn't work.
All right.
Don't you agree
Final
with
question
me?
on that, please.
Don't you agree with me at the very least that like the more informed you are about a decision, the more likely it is that that decision is more consensual?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I understand where you're taking it, right? Like with more information, you're more likely to have informed consent. in certain
Yeah,
cases.
all else being equal, yes.
Right,
More
which is
information, the
why
better.
you should be an anarchist and be against the government because you'll have more information if the government
How
isn't
would you have
regulating
more
things.
information?
Okay.
If
All right, hon.
you
It's
have
not
more
possible for the
regulations,
state
then they
to
have
have a more
constantly-
effective regulation than the
Oh
market.
my
It's not
Let's
possible.
everyone. Okay. Look. The siren song of the ant cap is in
I have
full
a single
effect, right?
question.
And look. Okay, you have three facts you need to understand. Yes, Scott's an ant cap. Yes, he's serious. And no, you cannot change his mind. Okay, like
This is why.
let's make that the guiding principle of this fucking stream. Okay.
Okay, this is why Prime. I think this is why, like, Scott. I love Scott, right? But I think for that, I think we should maybe focus on other people for the last 15 minutes of this, right?
Actually, on the topic of informed consent, I think for future Prime panels, there should be a disclaimer label that there's yes, Scott's and ANCAP informed consent.
Do you want me to build an
all those
overlay
three
for you, Prime?
caveats.
Maybe that.
Regulate
Personally,
the crime stream. Do it.
I really enjoy Scott's unique perspective on these things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not,
Okay, so
it's
the
not
rest of you.
abrasive to me in the slightest.
So the rest of you, great, because I think the original topic was actually not really about the information regulation in AI, but about the imagery, right? I use child porn because that's the first thing I think of. There are lots of Muslims in the world, lots of
You
Catholics.
use child porn? Gross.
Oh God, there are lots of Muslims in the world, lots of Catholics. So if we allowed AI to generate child porn, there's going to be lots of child porn being generated, right, all over the fucking internet.
Yeah, so it's a lot
Um,
of teachers. Yeah, true.
Yeah, sure. So I think so I'd want to make that illegal. It seems like some of you guys disagree with that. I know Scott disagrees with it.
Something that you have to remember about anything that is AI art or AI photography, as much as you can call it photography, is that it has to be trained on something. And so in this world, and I don't personally know if this is possible on any given, even a totally free, unbiased AI, in this world where you are able to generate CP on an AI photography bot, you are also saying that they can train on images of CP. Has no one thought of that?
You don't
Not
need that.
no,
You
that's
don't-
not
you could
actually
just combi-
necessarily true
You
at
could just
all.
combine lolly.
Is that
and
not
combine
necessarily
regular
true?
porn.
Please,
No,
I'm really interested in erudite, actually.
So my understanding is that it has it needs to be trained on something, but you can train it on normal pictures of children not being inappropriate at all, like in bathing suits, just being kids and whatnot, and it can it would composite together what it understands of human genitalia, probably from adult pornographic images, and would
Okay.
probably be able to put them together. I don't think that to have CP on AI, it necessarily requires that kids be victimized for the training
Right.
data.
That is
It's
what
also
you're-
in
and
medical
I've heard-
textbooks.
That's my
And I've
understanding.
heard-
I'm super limited knowledge in AI, so somebody can correct me if I'm
I
wrong.
think there are probably ways they could circumvent needing to involve actual children, through CGI or
Yeah.
whatever the fuck. Yeah, I'm sure.
Lolicon.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've heard the argument that it's not that clear cut that allowing these things to generate AI child porn would be harmful to children. But so I'm wondering, is there like any evidence of that, like at all? Because
It's
everything that
very,
I've been able
very.
to find is the opposite, right? It's all about like objectification, normalization, etc.
Yeah.
Right?
I
It's all over the place,
extensively.
dude.
Go ahead, Johnny.
I'm sorry. I had a couple of debates a couple of years back on the doll issue, and so I did at that point look up statistic as to whether or not something like a child, we'll call it
Real doll.
substitute, is actually something that helps people who are pedophiles not to actually aggress on real children. And the answers are so incredibly all over the place that I don't think any real statistic can be said to be true on it.
Well, we can't really do studies on extremely taboo sexual
Stanford
behaviors,
Prison
right?
Experiment 2.0.
So yeah,
Lies.
so I actually extensively researched this as well, not just for CP, but for other reasons. Like there's people that are into necrophilia or sexual abuse, like you're brought up in your premise, Prime. I think that we'd have to use external factors to make a determination as to whether we buy into the idea of people being able to be sated by consumption of porn versus their actual fetish. What I can say is that we know that overconsumption of porn can lead to people having sort of a decreased, like, sexual drive, like within their relationships and their marriages. If you're buying into and sort of cultivating your own like taboo fetish, could we not say that you're sort of mitigating your real life sexual impulses? Like by
Yeah, I
association?
think doesn't the research show the opposite, that people end up
Yeah.
getting more extreme, their tastes become more extreme as they
But we're talking about whether you actually want to act on it, not your interest.
Well, the other problem
No,
is if AI is super available to everybody, right? And we have very limited, and NotSoErudite I think will back me up on this. Like we have very limited information on sexual imprinting, right? And so like ease of availability of child pornography towards people that are young that may develop fetishes or paraphilic disorders at a younger age. Like we don't know what type of effect that could have. It could have the exact opposite effect for all we know. Again, we can't run that study, but if CP that's AI generated is like easily accessible to like kids regularly, like it could drastically change the numbers in one direction or the other. We just don't fucking know.
Regulate porn.
Well,
Right. So given that we don't really know, like, it doesn't make more sense to be cautious and to just ban this entirely.
Banning this entirely isn't being cautious, because if you ban it entirely, it also means no research can be done on it. It's the problem we actually have right now with DMT in the United States. The only places that can really study the effects of DMT in therapy is typically countries like in the EU, where DMT is way less strictly regulated. And so it's like, if you just make it illegal, what it actually means is that we'll never actually get the answer. And people are going to proceed forward, probably in like black market kind of ways at first. And now we have this market burgeoning with even less knowledge and researchers less capable of accessing these things, which is like the worst possible outcome.
Okay, so you're right about that, but when I said this is an issue with my phrasing. When I said ban it entirely, I meant like public use.
So like dissemination.
The public isn't able to produce this AI child porn, but if researchers want to do this in some kind of lab setting where they're doing studies on its effects, that they could get some kind of pass to do that.
I think the thing that gives me pause is if we really don't know the answer as to whether predators can be sated by consumption of porn, then you removing one of their access points, which has no victim. I mean, like AI generated CP doesn't involve an actual child. You're just preserving all of the demand for real child porn. So if we really don't know the answer, it seems like you're doing more harm by eliminating it entirely.
But also, like, what if it was super photo? My friend Dooby has made this argument a few times with me. But like, what if it was super photorealistic and it was like the current crop of Disney stars, right? Like,
or VR.
Or I mean, whatever. But just like, the point is that it's super realistic, and it's like of the current crop of Disney stars, and no one has been hurt. No one's hurt in creating it. But there it is, and yeah.
So I think we have to make sure when we're regulating things. I really hate regulating because something feels icky. I really want to regulate because it like leads to the best possible outcomes for the maximum number of people. So in the case of like child porn, all I want to do, no matter what, is reduce the number of children victimized by sexual abuse. That is my sole goal. That's the main thing. I don't care about pedophiles having access to anything because I just want pedophiles to have a happy life. I don't give a fuck. All I want is kids not to be victimized. And what I want to make sure that we do in like policy and regulation, there's like this knee-jerk reaction when people hear the word CP to be like really bad and icky, because it is really bad and icky. The issue is if you can remove all forms of victimization, can you now offset it and do some benefit without any harm? And that's a really important question, as Kilo's saying, of like, what if the availability of this, like say it's not freely available, but it can be essentially like prescribed to some degree, right? So like you need access to it. You can't just, anyone can do it. Would that be better for society and allow researchers to do it? The issue with all of this stuff is we don't know, because as Scott brought up, we know pretty much nothing about what's probably a critical window for sexual drive, and like specifically the kinks and fetishes. We don't really know where that window is. It's sure imprinting, and it's probably different between like the sexes at least. There's women, some evidence for that. So it's like we really don't know. And I would agree, like the idea of kids having access to this is like not kids, but like 12-year-old boys, right? Is really concerning to me because I don't know what's solidified by that point. Orientation is for sure solidified. I don't know if kinks are.
I'm curious. Do you guys think 12-year-old boys or any gender should have access to porn, like any kind of porn? Like, is that something you guys are okay with?
Do I think they should have access to porn? I think it's on the parents to determine whether or not they.
Well, I'm asking. So, if it was your child, would you allow your child access to porn?
No.
Okay. Would you say that websites should require?
To be fair, I don't think most parents allow their kids.
I love how people are like, "Well, you gotta live and let live." Your kids? Oh no, absolutely not.
Right.
I think no kids.
A reasonable
but how
age.
do you enforce that?
Well,
I have a very complicated scheme, and it does involve a little bit of government intervention. So
I just talked to a woman, not on stream, but I talked to a woman
about it.
Congrats.
I know, right? It's such a very awesome, right? Like, it happens once every 8 months, so I'm pretty psyched too. I just talked to a woman. I asked her this specific question because she's a sex worker, and I was like, "Hey, like, would you allow your kid to watch porn?" The reason why this came up because I brought up my own past, right, and how I was a kid and I got exposed to like cable fucking porn, right? And she was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Like it's a thing that kids are going to do, and so like it would be better for her to allow it, and then have her kids have any questions, right? Like understanding that porn can be harmful and unrealistic, then she would be there to talk to them."
It's like the principle of like
sounds
letting
like
your
a
kids
shitty
drink
mom.
under your own roof type of thing. Of like, well, better than
sounds
drink
like-
in my basement.
Sounds like the kind of mom that would do sex work, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
I think in the same way that you don't let kids into a strip club, you should not let kids into what is essentially a virtual strip club.
Well, and the mediums for them digesting pornography usually like. So if you have an iPad, you can child lock it to where they can't just access any website or they can't open up Safari on their own. They have to like type in a little password or whatever. If you're not implementing those tools,
Would you require, or would you say that parents who allow their children, like Pram's friend, parents who allow their children to access porn in any context, should they have some kind of legal action taken against them?
No, I think that's
Why not?
on you. How early you want to expose your child to pornography?
Isn't that like a form of abuse?
Why would that be a form of abuse?
I mean, I feel like
you're sitting
sexualizing-
watching. What if you
exposing a
watch porn
child to
with
like
your kid? Is that weird?
Yeah.
Kind of abuse, yeah.
Well, you're asking me to say that the blanket statement of exposing someone who's under the age of 18 to pornography is abusive. I mean, in certain contexts, yeah, it can be. I don't think it always is.
in what context is it okay for like a parent to allow their child to watch porn? Like a 12-year-old, like I said earlier.
Well, 12-year-old, I wouldn't do it personally.
No, I'm not asking if you do it
Good for
personally.
you.
I'm saying if a parent did want to, if Prime's friend wanted to just allow their kid to sit on the couch and watch whatever porn is on TV.
I don't know. If they started reaching
hardcore-
the age. How old were you when you started like legitimately being interested in girls? 11 or
Me?
12? Yeah.
Me, fuck.
I
Probably
wish
younger than
never.
that.
Why?
So, okay,
Oh,
so my
dude.
personal
There
experience.
is what you define as it like is watching Game of Thrones watching porn?
Yeah, the sex scenes, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think if you sit your kid down and you're like, hey, this is something you're going to start to think about a lot, and I kind of just want you to know what's going on. We have a really weird, like, shameful approach to having the conversation with children, and I think in a lot of cases parents put it off for too long.
Yeah, but now
I don't
you're
know.
just putting it on actresses and actors on screen
Yeah.
who are doing it
Porn
in a way
is
that's
not a
probably
good
not realistic.
substitute.
I'm
I'm not saying a
want,
substitute. I'm saying, hey, if you're going to digest this, I'm not going to stop you. I just want you to be aware of what is going on here, what the purpose of it is. All
Well,
that
yeah,
good
but you
stuff.
can do that without having them watch porn. Like,
I'm not saying I'm going to put an iPhone in front of their face and say, hey, pull up Pornhub. Let's go over this
okay,
shit.
but
I'm
yeah,
saying,
it does do that.
Let me
Is-
see
is
them
that-
cream pies,
Like,
dude.
would you make it
yeah,
illegal?
here's what you type into the search bar. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, hey, this stuff is out there. I can't keep tabs on you 24/7. I want you to be aware of what's going on here for more educational standpoint.
so Kilo, you went where exactly where I was thinking with this conversation. Like, and look, we're almost out of time here. Maybe we should make this a separate topic. That might be the thing. But like it seems to me, and maybe you guys disagree, that there's a difference between saying that like you are, if you look at this, you aren't banned from doing it, rather than, hey, let's like sit down and like just like watch a few movies together, right? Like
That would be super weird. That would be. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Parents are like sitting down and being like, "This
Fuck
is
you
my
up.
favorite porno, Johnny. I hope you enjoy it too. I love BBC." You know, weird. That's weird. Weird shit.
So-
Just like parents who are like doing drugs and alcohol in the basement with their kids, being like, "I'm the cool mom." But like,
Can I just
I don't know.
say-
I think porn is this inevitable thing that like parents are going to have to talk to their kids about and realize that like they just are going to access it.
As-
Yeah.
Using little Johnny as like a thing for a child has
We
fucked
can-
me
we-
up.
we can
That's
stop.
awful.
So
Sorry.
as
I'm
a
sorry that you're in that
parent,
position.
I don't think we can
buddy.
stop 16-year-olds
As-
from
as a
accessing
parent-
porn.
That's what I'm
Oh,
saying,
Scott.
Kyla.
Scott,
They'll
Scott,
just
when
they'll
you
just take their friends' phones. Like
That's
if
what
you
I'm
can-
saying. Yes.
If you can
Oh,
stop,
I
if you
have an
can,
idea.
I'm
Scott-
super open to hearing it.
It's
But
got an army for a reason.
Yeah,
Somebody
Scott,
who's
I
worked
wanna-
with teens for like
Okay.
10 years.
Scott,
I-
I'm gonna go to you
Involves the
next.
DMV.
all right.
Scott,
so
I'm gonna go to you
am I
next.
the only parent
I just
here?
want
I'm
to say,
curious.
just quickly, but like, yeah, I think there is a difference here, right? And I think that difference is important. It seems to me that you like one is saying that, yeah, the world is a dangerous place, and we allow children to experience the world at their own pace, right? And come and ask questions. I think if you're a good parent, and you let them come back and ask questions. So you could say, like, hey, you're gonna be even having sex, right? Like, just put like the sex talk, right, is part of it. That didn't say like, hey, I'm gonna like get a woman for you, or I'm gonna get a man for you, right? And then you're gonna fuck them, and then we'll figure out afterwards. It's like, well, you are gonna have these experiences out there in the world. They're gonna be adult experiences. This is gonna happen to you, and when those happen, I'm open for you to come back to me and be perfectly honest, and so we can like contextualize these things. But yeah, Scott, you are a parent. I would like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So when you're a parent, right, you have to recognize that your child is an emergent adult. Your child is someone that has human rights, that is an individual in their own right. But at the same time, we do not give them full consent, and we do not allow them to exercise their rights fully because they're not old enough to be able to engage in as a moral agent. And so if the thing is when you're talking about pornography with children, I think there's kind of two things we're discussing. The first one is, are you intentionally exposing them to something that would be against their will as an adult, because they're an emergent adult, right? In their current situation, they're incapable of really understanding what's occurring, right? But as an adult, are you doing something to them that will traumatize them? And I think we've had that discussion right now on two ends of the spectrum, right? One is like, sit down and watch a bunch of hardcore porn with me. And then one is like, hey, this stuff exists. Let's talk about it so that you're not traumatized, or you don't have weird feelings, or you don't get like crazy ideas about women and sex and things like that because like your friend on the school bus showed you like some fucking like hardcore sexual harassment Japanese porn, and like you think it's a good idea to like lift your hand up women's skirts or something, right? So there's those two ends of that. And so when someone is an outside observer, they have a right to obtain guardianship of your child if you are doing things to that child that is permanently damaging in some capacity. I think the second question is one about moral preference, right? Because I think we all have our own values. We all have our own kind of ways that we want to shape and socialize the child. And that can go from the most puritanical of belief systems, right, to the, to the sex worker friend, right? And where we can lay judgment on that is likely an individual parent's choice, right? Like, it's not really like I can make moral like kind of like prescriptions or moral ideas about why I think the OnlyFans girl that's showing porn to her kids is a piece of shit. But like, it's my impetus to prove that there's some form of psychological harm, or that there's something done that they as an adult would not be able to do. And in many of those cases, I likely wouldn't. And at the same time, I know that, like, if I find out that bitch is a teacher at my kid's school, I should be fucking out, right? Like, I should be able to disassociate with somebody that likes showing porn to kids, because that's a fucking weirdo to me.
Yeah, this might be a longer conversation, a longer topic.
That's a whole other bag of worms, dude. It's crazy.
No. Well, I'm glad we took up a lot of time on ANCAP Story Hour this time. So that was more important. But no, yeah, I think that's a super interesting topic, and we can go lots of places with it. So I'll write it down. Man, I gotta be careful, like what I write down on my computer, because I feel like I feel everywhere.
God, I'm very offended you said that about Japanese people.
I said that about Japanese pornography. That's
Japanese culture is pretty fucked.
That's weird.
Right?
Dude, when I was in 8th grade, there was this kid who, like, at some point, like at a recess or something, he told us that he had, like, jacked off, and all of the boys made fun of him. We like gave him a nickname that was like that. I can't remember what it was. It was something related to jacking off, and we like used it as like a dog whistle for like making fun of him. And I think all of us had probably done it at that point. I know I did. I didn't really participate in the bullying that much, but I didn't really say anything. I was kind of like, oh yeah, I don't want people to make fun of me, so I just shut up. And I think that just points to the fact that we have this weird, shameful culture about the things that you start to experience and feel when you're 12, 13, 14. And there are probably healthier ways to kind of wean, your kids into the realm of, especially when they have access. Everyone has a phone. Everyone has, Google. They know how to get to these things. So that's all I'm saying.
Dooby, don't talk. You want
blowjob
classes in high school.
So I think it's fine, because I feel like there's some things that just should be shamed, right? So if you're gonna jack off, do it. But you don't need to go around telling everybody about it. It's fucking weird. And it's okay to say that's fucking weird. And he
didn't run up to us and be like, "Yo, I jerked off. Are you guys excited for me?" It was like we're just talking about whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, I've done it."
After you wash your hands. Erudite, are you talking to your audience or are you talking to us? Just want to be clear.
I was muted, but I was meant to talk to you guys. Sorry. I was going to say, there's a really big difference between shaming people for like TMI in social conversations and shaming people for like normal healthy behaviors, right? Like, I think that's a distinction we have to make. I think it's weird for me to like be like, hey bro, I don't need to hear about the fact that like you have some leftover cum on your hands. Not interested. Don't care. Glad you masturbated, right? That's a TMI thing. But it's not like I'm upset that he's masturbated, right? There has to be a nuance of just like, ew, yuck, don't want to hear about it. It's a bad thing.
We were making fun of the fact that he had masturbated.
Okay.
No.
You were kids.
I hope you shamed him into
being
being
asexual. That's the distinction I'm making between Kilo, I'm agreeing with you, Kilo, and what you're saying, which is like, we should shame people. It's like, well, we should shame people for some things, not...
Yeah, I didn't think if he was like being a weirdo about it. He's like, man, I was so fucking horny last night. Like, yeah, it'd be really weird.
You got to shame the companies that poisoned his brain with fucking pornography. That's
yeah, you're right. That's what
don't shame the
blame
victim.
the women directly
or the parents.
No, you don't shame. Blame the parents too. Blame the parents.
Can I tell you how terrible I feel as a grown man who had also jerked off at that point? I find it terrible that we literally bullied him into thinking that it was like shameful or it was too early.
No.
I'm saying now in retrospect is
right.
Yeah.
Do you want us to shame you, like to like recompense or something?
Yeah, let's make reparations for this. I'm not gonna say the kid's name, but this is for you, buddy.
All right.
The trick, you actually like that, huh?
Let's. I think we should have this topic. I think it's a super interesting one, actually. So let me save that for another time. But we'll go on to our next topic. And just quickly, guys, if you are enjoying the content, right, like this was gold, I think, right? Like I think we had a lot of fun here. Then hit that
Black
follow
and
button.
gold, specifically.
Quack and go to bar. Oh boy.
Took you a second. It's
So
okay.
that's so mid 2000s, Scott.
Oh god.